I'm drawn to a couple of things from these conversations between the leaders. I'm also, as you know, drawn every morning to your messages, particularly the ones that arrive before I've set my stall out. For example, JP says, James, you have to discuss question time from last night and how angry Rishi Sunak was with every question. The disdain towards the public was uncomfortable to watch. I've tracked this a bit, and he's a very angry man, isn't he? There's an air, a sense that he can't quite believe people aren't doing what he wants them to do. It's almost as if he sort of expects to get a biscuit every time he opens his mouth, like a child. He's like a petulant child, a sort of angry, spoilt child. I didn't think this at the beginning of the campaign. I have to be honest with you. I had plenty of criticisms of him, but that wasn't one of them. But as it goes on, the more he is exposed to the public, the worse I think he looks. And never more so. In fact, quite a few of you picking up on this. Lawrence writes, did you notice how over it Rishi Sunak appeared? That's a dead man behind those eyes. Johnny and Ho says, wasn't Sunak vile last night? He was abusive towards that young girl at the end. I didn't see it. I was busy. I was doing something at the O2. But I am drawn to one particular comment, which I think speaks volumes of what I'm nudging you towards early doors this morning. I also realised that the national service thing was announced when I was off. I said Lewis Goodall steered you through the national service conversations, because I don't know whether you ever have this. It's sort of in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, I don't think I ever got stuck into that. Why did I never get stuck into that? That's got you and me written all over it. That's a sort of like, if you programmed an algorithm to come up with a story that we would enjoy talking about together, Rishi Sunak bringing back national service would be a contender for the number one spot. Admittedly, it would be pushed into second place by deciding to come back from D-Day commemorations earlier, but still it would be a contender for the number one spot. So I went back to... I checked my calendar. I actually checked my diary to work out why it had happened. And it was announced on a Friday after I'd come off air, I think. So I never really got the chance to get stuck into it. So we can rectify that a bit today, because he's tried to reanimate the ghost of the national service debacle.
You'll have a set of sanctions and incentives, and we will look at the models that are existing around Europe to get the appropriate mix of those. There's a range of different options that exist.
For example?
There's all sorts of things that people do across Europe, whether that's looking at driving licenses, other access to finance, all sorts of other things. The right thing to do is to allow...
Access to finance?
Yes.
So if people don't want to do national service, what, you're going to take their bank cards away? What do you
mean?
There's
access. there's lots of different models around Europe. There's lots of different models around Europe. This is being done in multiple countries in Europe.
I don't doubt it. I'm just asking you what you think.
So there's a range of things, and we will have a Royal Commission look at all of those, come back to the government and recommend what the appropriate mix of incentives and sanctions is.
Sanctions. So I've tried to follow this story. I followed it from when it sounded as if every 18-year-old in the country was going to have to spend a year playing soldiers. And then I think it swerved a little bit into it won't be compulsory, or it won't be for very long. It will be compulsory. It won't be for... No, it won't be. So we had it won't be compulsory, didn't we? So and then it will be compulsory, but it won't be for a year. How many iterations is that of the policy? I don't know why I've got my finger. I'm trying to count on my fingers, but they've gone a bit out of control. So let me start again. So we'll have every 18-year-old in the country will have to play soldiers for a year. Number one. Then it won't be compulsory, number two, and then it won't be for a year, number three. And now today we find ourselves examining the possibility that young people will be sanctioned if they don't join in, which means it will be sort of semi-compulsory, doesn't it? Is that what it means? It will be semi-compulsory? So you'll be sanctioned if you don't do it, but you won't be sent to jail. It's not going to be like national service in Israel or something like that. You won't be sent to jail if you don't join in, like that amazing young woman we spoke to a couple of months ago. What's going on? What's the mindset here that allows Rishi Sunak to come up with a scheme like this and to think that it's a good idea? What I want you to do is a slightly more challenging task than usual. What I want you to do is to try to work out what he is appealing to. And I say what he is appealing to rather than who, because it's a more nuanced inquiry that way. What is he appealing to? So if I say who, then you can just say gammon or something like that. But if I say what is he trying to appeal to here? Do you know what I was thinking of this morning as I made my way down the stairs? I was thinking of that line that we have stumbled across so many times together, sometimes unexpectedly. And that line is, which has become one of those phrases that jumps from the show and assumes a life of its own. Do you know which phrase I'm talking about? Out of all the sort of phrases that can suffer a little bit from stuck needle syndrome on this programme, I don't mean you. That phrase, which I think first appeared when we were talking about Brexit with people with people born overseas whose own family had voted for Brexit in order to get rid of the immigrants. And you'd turn to your mother-in-law and you'd say, but I'm one of those people. And they'd say, no, I don't mean you. I don't mean you. I mean all the other ones, the ones that Farage talks about, not the actual real people who I know, the ones in the posters and the Daily Mail editorials. I don't mean you. But the problem is, with a blunt instrument, that it does mean you. So I found myself thinking, there's something else I've picked up on recently, is this demonization of young people. Sometimes it's quite an ugly politicized attempt to portray them all as criminals or gangsters. It's gone on through the ages. The demonization of the younger generation by the older generation is as old as anything. But it's particularly pungent at the moment because it adds to the divisions between the generations, when the generation that really has lost out the most is the youngest generation. The Daily Telegraph article that said they should all do national service as a way of saying thank you for the furlough. Even by the standards of the unhinged headline feature that we enjoy enormously on this programme, I must try and do one today. When you've got people writing for the Daily Telegraph about why young people must do national service to say thank you for the furlough scheme, which didn't help them at all directly. Indeed, much of the COVID policy called upon young people to endure privations in order to keep the older generation alive. But what is it appealing to? The idea that young people might face restrictions on access to finance. I presume that means loans of some kind. You can understand Fiona Bruce's confusion when she said, what do you mean? Do you mean they'll have their bank cards taken away? I presume it just means access to loans or some sort of preferential financial scheme. Or driving licenses. They could have restrictions on their driving licenses if they refuse to do national service. Now, I have a tendency, as you know, to overthink these things. And it first came to the fore during COVID. Do you remember how many times at the beginning of the COVID catastrophe we found ourselves wondering what the secret master plan was? Wondering whether it was sinister or not. We couldn't quite work out what the plan was. We found it together. Well, maybe you didn't, but I certainly found it very, very hard to believe that they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, looking back, that makes me incredibly naive, doesn't it? If you think about, I've written a whole book about the creation of the ecosystem in which this incompetence could flourish. But at the time, when it started, I couldn't quite believe that you could become prime minister or you could become the most senior advisor, unelected bureaucrat in the country and not have a clue what you were doing or be too busy arguing with your boss's wife to get a grip on the national catastrophe. So I always thought that there might be some sort of 3D chess going on. I love that phrase. Like, there'd be some sort of 3D chess going on that you and I, lesser mortals like you and me, were not able to discern. You know, they wouldn't let you know. They wouldn't tell the people in the cheap seats what was going on backstage, would they? And as it progressed and as more detail emerged and continues to, you realise not only were they making it up as they were going along, in a lot of cases, but they were also sorting their mates out with contracts on a scale that would make Donald Trump's eyes water. And I suffer from the same condition here a bit. I sort of think Sunak must have in his mind a rationale for this. To me, it is pant-wettingly stupid and actually quite offensive, this suggestion. But I am only one person. and he is Prime Minister. He has a phalanx of advisors, an army of pollsters. He has access to the findings of countless focus groups. So I can't help thinking that they're all sitting around a big table with a clear picture of why this is a good idea, why it is not only a good idea to introduce compulsory national service for all 18-year-olds, but also to take away the driving licenses or damage the financial status of any young people who refuse to join in. I'm thinking this must be designed to appeal to something. They must think that this presses some buttons. And my question for you this hour is what buttons? Because the other bit, the bit where I mention, oh, I don't mean you, is that how can anybody think this is a good idea for their own children? I can see how you might think it would work for your own grandchildren, but that's because you think your own children are doing a really bad job of parenting your grandchildren. Nobody's going to sit here and think, well, I can't teach my children the importance of hard work or values or ethics, so I think that some randoms employed on a weird government scheme are exactly the right people to teach my children the life lessons that I have failed to pass on to them. They're categorically counting, if you like, on people who look at a scheme like this and think, oh, my children don't need it or my grandchildren don't need it. But those plebs over there, they categorically need it. So I never got the chance to have much fun with the national service proposal. I am, with just under 2 weeks to go until polling day, allowing myself today the pleasure of a sort of retrospective romp through one of the earliest and biggest missteps of this whole dismal campaign. But I want to include the latest development, which is that your son or daughter, having passed their driving test, could have their driving licence taken away if they refuse to do Rishi Sunak's service. And it means that despite, I hope, an engaging and vaguely nuanced introduction, the question I've got for you is unerringly simple at the end of this process. The question I've got for you is this. What's he playing at with this particular policy and the evolution of the policy last night into something that would see young people having their driving licenses and access to finance taken away? What is actually going on? We're doing the Marvin Gaye. We haven't done the Marvin Gaye for a while. What's going on? With direct and specific reference to this issue.